Joining us now is Jamie Metzl. He's Executive Vice President at the Asia Society. Jamie has served as Deputy Staff Director to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and was an Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy at the Department of State. Jamie, thanks for coming in to talk to us about this situation. So Schumer, obviously, playing tough here and asking the administration to get tougher with China. Is that something that, given your experience with the country, that it'll respond to?
China certainly will respond to pressure, but it won't be pressure that comes from the United States, and China will make a lot of noise saying we're going to do what we want. But if the United States can work with other allies, particularly but not exclusively Europe and also Japan, and bring together a united coalition of all of the countries who are in many ways suffering from China's currency, call it what you want, control, manipulation, that will be very, very hard for China to ignore. But China is going to make all kinds of noise. They're going to retaliate. If the United States is going at it alone, it's going to be far more difficult.
Do you think that the United States is able to get that kind of support from the other regions you're talking about?
It will be, but there's a free rider problem. Everybody expects the United States to take the lead. China is, in my view, in my personal view, a little bit taking advantage of this international system that has been created to benefit everybody. And because of these currency manipulations, controls, whatever, they are getting a special subsidy for their exports. And when you go to places like the Philippines, even like Japan, a lot of other countries are suffering. So if there can be that kind of coalition, then that's what it's going to take. But it's going to be very, very difficult. It's going to require a lot of leadership, not just by the United States, but by the allies as well.
So is the criticism on Capitol Hill of Secretary Geithner and the administration fair, that this White House has been reluctant to take on China and take on the currency issues?
It probably is fair, but it's a very, very difficult thing to do. It would be far better to put the kind of pressure that is needed on China and let China respond. Already we've been delaying and delaying and delaying this certification that the Treasury Department needs to make of whether China is manipulating its currency. Everybody knows that it's controlling, manipulating, whatever. But at some point, the political pressure on the Obama administration is going to be so great that it's going to have to respond unless China takes the kind of appropriate action.
And that's what you suggested when Julie just posed the question a few minutes ago, that it won't come from external pressure. You're saying that internally, the government of Beijing will make the move basically when it feels like it.
Well, that's what they say. That certainly is the public line. But we saw at the time of the June G20 meetings in Canada, there began to be an international coalition to put pressure on China. And at that time, China announced a change in their policy, moving from a peg to the dollar to a managed float. But since that time, we haven't seen any meaningful appreciation of the RMB. And now we're coming up on G20 season again. There's talk of building an international coalition. And my sense is China is going to move just as much as it has to alleviate this kind of pressure. And that's why I think Senator Schumer uses tough language, but that's a very, very important voice that needs to be heard.
I'm curious about perceptions in China of this whole process that's going on elsewhere in the world. I mean, how closely are they watching, for instance, this Geithner hearing today? How much attention are they paying?
Yeah. Very, very closely. I mean, China has done a phenomenal job in its international diplomacy. They've done a great job in some ways of isolating the different potential pressure centers to keep the United States, Europe, Japan, and others from coming together. But they know that in spite of all of the talk of decoupling between Asian and American economies, China and Asia's economies are enormously dependent on their export markets, particularly the United States and also Europe. And so if there are these kind of pressures, particularly on currency, but also on intellectual property, on other fair, or should I say unfair trade practices, that really can hit them. They are not at all prepared for an economy where they can export less to the United States and Europe. So they need to listen. They are listening, but in their public statements, they are saying just what Mark just said, that nobody can pressure us. But ultimately,
we'll
that's not true.
figure it out when we want to.
Yeah.
All right, Jamie Metzl of the Asia Society, thanks for coming in.